as she said, I'm Sam Rosenthal. I'm an epidemiologist, so in my core, I'm a data person, and so I collect a lot of data to learn about what's going on, and then I use that to kind of inform what we need to be doing, and so that's the perspective I'm coming from. Jeff was incredibly helpful at helping me understand, who this group is, and folks here in their roles, and so I've done my very best to try to tailor this to the roles that you all have. But I have a lot of different perspectives and takes on this and have presented to other groups. So if there are pieces missing or you have questions about stuff that's not in here, like don't hesitate. I have a lot of information on this topic. Um, so thanks so much for having me. I love the opportunity to talk about this because I think it's so incredibly important. It's a really rapidly increasing concern, and I think we're not doing enough yet, and we got to hurry up because I think we're behind. Um, so you can go to the next slide. So here's what I'm hoping um I can share with you by the end of this, short discussion. Just understand what's going on with gambling, what's happening in Rhode Island, what are some warning signs in the workplace, how does gambling differ from like substance use disorder, how can we respond without stigma, and how can we connect our employees to help. So gambling has really changed, right? Like old school gambling was, hey, I'm gonna go gamble. You know, you go to the casino, you usually go with buddies, unless, maybe people go on their own if that's something they're into. They bring physical cash, they're in person, and that creates a limited opportunity for gambling. What's happened now very rapidly, um, is that now you can gamble anywhere at any time, even when you're at work. So if you have a smartphone, you have some digital form of payment, credit card, debit card, Cash App, Venmo, whatever it is, you can be gambling on your phone at any time and it's private. People don't need to know that you're doing it. They don't need to see that you're doing it. It's instant and you have access 24/7. So that's what we're up against. So why should employers care? I mean, I think folks here already know, but just to let you care about attendance and productivity, folks being able to concentrate on their work. Financial stability is important, right? That could jeopardize whether or not people can continue to work. Um, Workplace theft becomes an issue when someone develops a gambling disorder. Serious mental health issues that can also bring themselves into the workplace, compromised relationships, whether it's like familial friendship relationships at home or even relationships in the workplace, and then broader recovery. For folks who are already in recovery, risky gambling behaviors that might develop into gambling problems kind of threaten the entire recovery stability. So gambling doesn't look like other disorders. Unlike alcohol, like there's no smell, there's no needle marks, there's no intoxication. And these gambling problems can remain hidden even while someone continues to function at work or even while someone's fully in recovery from other substances. And I want to make clear, like gambling can be an addiction. It is actually in the DSM-5 TR, like as a diagnosis, as a behavioral addiction, and it's the only behavioral addiction that's currently in that category. And it shares very similar features as substance use disorders, like the craving for it, the loss of control, needing to do more and more gambling to get the same feeling, continuing to gamble even when it's harmed your life, and then trying to stop over and over again without success. So it's very similar in those ways. What makes it really hidden is that, historically, it takes people a really long time to seek treatment for gambling disorder. It can be many, many years later, but the harms are very significant. There can be serious financial devastation that not only compromises that person's financial security, but it could be their entire family or even extended family, right? Depending upon where they're getting their money from. And that is what harms relationships. There tends to be a dishonesty, a lying that happens. There can be legal consequences, especially if like they start to steal to get the funds that they need. And there's absolutely mental health crises. Something that I want to say that's really shocking and surprised me when I learned it is that gambling addiction has the highest rate. of suicide attempts of every other like addictive diagnosis of a behavioral addiction. One in four people with gambling disorder attempt suicide. So this isn't just thinking about it. This is one in four people with this disorder are attempting suicide. So this is really comorbid with mental health problems, and very risky. And we want to catch it if we can. So what's happening in Rhode Island specifically? Um, I work with BHDDH to help implement a survey of young adults in the state. So young adults age 18 to 25, if they reside in Rhode Island for any part of the year, whether it's just summer, whether it's the school year, whether it's all year round, they would be eligible. Students, non-students, full-time employed, part-time employed, unemployed, they would all be in this group that I'm surveying. And here's what I've found. And I want to say young adults are a high risk group because that's where they kind of establish some of their high risk behaviors during that time period, but also they're being aggressively targeted by advertisements too. So it's a really important group for this. So, real quick, just to distinguish here, there's a difference between gambling and problem gambling. Just like substance use, like there can be a perfectly healthy gambling behaviors, right? Like people can gamble. It can be a good time, it can be social, like it can be a healthy, good thing. And gambling is really just engaging in some activity or playing games of chance for money or betting on the outcome of something. Problem gambling is what the issue is. And that's when that gambling behavior starts to damage yourself, your family, or your daily life. So I want to distinguish between that before I show you some data. So in Rhode Island in 2018, I don't know if you're all aware, that's when at a federal level, the Supreme Court overturned a case that meant all of a sudden sports betting was legal nationally, and it was left up to the states. 2 weeks later, Rhode Island took advantage of that and legalized retail sports betting. A year later, they launched Sportsbook Rhode Island, which is where like most of the online betting in Rhode Island takes place. And just a couple of years ago, we legalized remote access to casino games. So now everything that you had to go to the casino to do, you can literally like remote access into the casino on your phone and do all those things. Just another like way that has made this more accessible for folks. I can't I can't see a slide. There it is. Oh, all right. So just from some of the research that I've conducted with young adults in Rhode Island, we've seen there are some groups disproportionately affected. So people of color are about 2 times at risk of gambling at the casino tables. Transgender young adults had almost 4 times the risk of problem gambling. Males have 2 to 4 times the risk of participating in most gambling activities. Heterosexual males have 3 to 6 times the risk of doing these more like digital gambling, so on your smartphone or just internet-based gambling. Um, if people are engaging in sports betting, they have 2.4 times the risk of having problem gambling, like actual disordered gambling. And those who gamble on their smartphone apps have more than 3 times the risk of problem gambling. So you can see there are certain like demographic groups who have a little greater risk, greater burden, but then there's also certain types of gambling behaviors that are more associated with development of problems. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not just gambling, right? It's like how you're gambling, how frequently you're gambling, and the consequences that it's having. So here's what we noticed. Overall, just participation in gambling, it's not been increasing. From 2022 to 2024, young adults gambled, or about 40% of them. So not quite half, 40% gambled. That didn't change. However, when you look at problem gambling, even though this prevalence is low, it almost doubled from 2022 to 2024. So even though overall gambling didn't change, problem gambling is increasing. And that's what we're concerned about. If we narrow down just to gamblers and we say, okay, among young adults who gamble, again, problem gambling almost doubled from 22 to 24. And that means more than 1 in 10 people who are young adults and gamble are experiencing problem gambling. So now those numbers are getting bigger. 1 in 10. If we drill down further, a high risk group here are young adults who are heterosexual males. These numbers get really frightening, to be honest. This almost doubled as well from 22 to 24, and it's almost 1 in 5 young adults who are heterosexual male gamblers who are experiencing problem gambling. That's a huge number, right? Like 1 in 5 of the heterosexual young adult males that you see who gamble are experiencing problem gambling in a way that likely needs some intervention. And if you look at the types, you can see this is being driven by these like more digital access gambling. So from 22 to 24, sports betting almost doubled, app-based betting doubled. And for heterosexual male gamblers, the proportions are really high. By 24, around 1 in 3 heterosexual male gamblers are doing app-based betting, and more than 40% of heterosexual male gamblers are engaging in sports betting. So these are just ubiquitous behaviors now. Like this is just really common in certain populations. It's standard behavior, and it's increasing rapidly over time. And I just want to show you from 22 to 24 the types that really increased. In particular, think even raffle tickets increased, lottery tickets increased. The casino slot machines more than doubled. And I'll talk to you about why that might be. Sports betting almost doubled, app gambling doubled, um, internet gambling more than doubled, almost tripled, and other slot machines. I'll talk to you about the slot machines. But we're just seeing increases across almost all types. And we're seeing increases in the number of types of gambling that people are doing. And the research suggests that the more different types people are doing, the greater their risk is to develop problems. And so this is just when I want to show where those biggest increases were. And it's mainly around like slot machines, apps, and sports betting. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about because a lot of people don't know about these emerging risks that are happening right now. Something that's new is like sports betting's been around, right? Now they're starting to do in-game sports betting. So like you're watching the game and right in the middle, you're like, who's going to get the next shot? Who's going to score X number of points by halftime, right? So it really keeps people going, like directly involved every moment. We have these online casinos now legalized in Rhode Island in 2024, which is why we're seeing that increase in those slot machines. Pretty dramatic. It's because we changed our policies. There's like daily fantasy sports. Now there's crypto gambling where you can just do all your gambling in cryptocurrency. And there's this mix where video games are kind of turning into gambling. So you can put wagers on things in your video games. And there are these things called loot boxes. These are really high risk for youth, actually, where you pay real money for fake money in a game. You use your fake money to buy like a box that has a surprise reward in it, some variable reward. It might be something that gives you more fake money. It might be something that gives you no fake money. But ultimately, that fake money translates to real money, and that's just gambling. So we have kids in video games thinking they're playing a game and they're gambling, and they're starting that process early. We also have these prediction markets now, like Kalshi, which Christiana mentioned at the beginning, where you can bet on your favorite reality show, who's going to win an election, who's going to start a war, if it's going to start raining. I mean, if you can think of it, there are bets on it, which just makes it even more integrated into everybody's life, and it's getting more and more people involved. And we've got this 24/7 access and a phone in everyone's pocket. Was any of that new for folks? Have people heard of those things, or were any of those things surprising?
It is to me just I'm shocked at the suicide rates. I'm
Mm,
shocked at and then just the pervasiveness of it and how far it's reaching now.
yeah, absolutely. I know it's frightening, honestly, and it's happening so quickly that it's no one's getting ahead of it, honestly.
Yeah, we seem behind the eight ball.
We are behind the eight ball for sure. And it's because the business is booming faster than we're thinking about it. And the suicide rate is frightening. And it's
Yes.
honestly it's surprising. Like because, we know all of these we know just from being in that recovery space, right, that like mental illness is so highly co-occurring with all different kinds of dependencies and addictions. But for that rate to be so high it's really frightening, and it makes it even more of a, like an important responsibility for us to be trying to be aware, ask questions, and identify because we want to intervene before that suicide risk is there. Yeah, and the young adults are absolutely being targeted the most. Um, Probably because they're on their phones the most. They get this financial independence, and then all of a sudden they can do what they want with their money. And also, the economy sucks, guys. Let's be clear. For young adults, this is a rough time, right? Like, are they gonna be able to find a job? Are they gonna be able to find a steady job? Are they gonna be able to get paid enough to rent a place or like move out of their situation? Are they ever gonna own a house? Can they ever make money to support a family? And so sometimes the gambling seems like um a good hustle, like a good alternative when the economy is so tough. So they're really being targeted. So I just want to say that problem gambling interacts with so many of these other stressors, especially financial stress, which we all know is tied to basically everything in life, which can reinforce our gambling problem. It can reinforce a pre-existing substance use problem. It can continue to harm our mental health, our physical health, our performance at work and school, and compromise our relationships. And these things are all a part of this kind of recovery ecosystem, and they tend to like reinforce and harm. And so problem gambling is really just a part of the broader recovery ecosystem and not some like brand new problem. It really overlaps with everything else that we've already been thinking about. So what does it look like, right? Maybe somebody works for you, maybe you're working with somebody. What would it look like? Well, it's going to look like some kind of loss of control, somebody betting more and more, somebody chasing their losses, lying. Lying is a huge indicator. It's financial consequences and like being unable to stop. Those are not necessarily things that are easy to see. So, what are some warning signs that maybe we could be looking out for in a workplace setting? I can't see that slide again. It's probably that. It's because it's that Google Drive. All right. So, if you have people working for you and you see that they're repeatedly borrowing money, they're asking for paycheck advances. They're selling their possessions. You can see there's some financial desperation there, maybe secretive phone use, mood changes after big sporting events, some like preoccupation. They're not present, they're distant, like constantly talking about sports or other kind of betting. Um, I think those are some warning signs. Unfortunately, none of those are conclusive, right? Like you might see one of those. It doesn't mean somebody has a gambling problem, but those are some warning signs to look out for so that we can be cognizant and aware of what might be going on that might help us to like initiate a friendly conversation. So those are kind of the things that I would look out for. So what it's not about laziness or poor character or a lack of intelligence, and it's not just bad decisions. Like this is a behavioral addiction just like the others that we know about, right? This is physiologically addictive. And so we have to be really careful not to stigmatize this. And there's a lot here on this slide, but what I just want you to focus on is that this impacts the brain the same way as substance use disorders. There's a dopamine pathway. You're like excited, anticipating that you get to gamble. Then you get a big dopamine hit to build this excitement. You get a big rush, a big release of dopamine when you win. The loss or a near miss keeps you wanting to get more and more. And then that addiction takes hold, and that cycle continues and continues. And honestly, it's what's happening in the brain is almost the same, right, as with a substance use disorder in terms of that dopamine pathway. Recovery for gambling problems can be particularly hard because we can't avoid money, right? We can try to stay away from alcohol, places where there's alcohol, but we can't stay away from money. And sports are everywhere. And these ads, especially for young people, are absolutely everywhere. They are inundated. And those apps that you can use to gamble are just open 24/7 in your pocket. So I'm curious what would concern you most? There's no right answer. But you could put in the chat or you could just tell me because we got a small group. But like an employee borrowing money, an employee always checking sportsbook on their phone, an employee asking coworkers for loans, or an employee missing work after like a big sports event. What do you think? Asking coworkers for loans. Checking the sports book. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
would say number
yeah.
three for
Number
sure.
three. Yeah. Is that something anyone has seen or heard in the workplace? No. Yeah, so I guess that would feel like a big red flag. And so sometimes it might be happening and you don't know about it or you don't hear about it too. But technically all of these are red flags, right? And unfortunately, like none of these are conclusive. You're not going to know for sure somebody has a problem and there could be other reasons for these things. But these are red flags that might make you like want to just initiate a helpful conversation. And Monica, I didn't see your comment, but it absolutely is in games that's on Roblox, for kids. You know, like even in Minecraft and those kinds of things, there are things that resemble gambling. So, absolutely. All right. So we've talked about some warning signs, some red flags. So what would you do? One thing is have an eye out for the behaviors. Notice if those behaviors are happening. Focus on performance. Try to avoid diagnosing and offer support. And you should know referral resources, which I'm gonna show you today, because then you can hand them off. And sometimes like that's all that's needed. You know, sometimes that's all that's needed. But if you don't know, you can't provide that support. So that's something I'm hoping you can take away today. So what you shouldn't do is accuse or shame. You also don't have to become someone's therapist, right? There's like a way to be compassionate and have these conversations in a simple way, without like becoming someone's therapist, right? Or needing to take on the burden because it's overwhelming for that person. It would be overwhelming for you. Definitely don't lend someone money. It will not serve them. But also don't ignore it. So those are really, really important. And frankly, Rebecca was saying how there's a balance, right? Like you want to be compassionate, but you also need performance and you want to give support, but you don't want to become the therapist. And those things are a lot harder to actually do than they are for us to talk about doing. And so there's a lot to manage there. So gambling recovery already fits in the recovery friendly workplace model. So psychological safety, making room for safe disclosure without shame or judgments, treating those concerns as a health and recovery issue, right? Like not as a problem or a disease. Um, Resources like EAP, benefits and referrals, including gambling support. That's already built into that recovery friendly workplace model. Flexibility, like allowing time for treatment and peer and financial recovery support, because people aren't just recovering to not gamble. They're going to need a financial recovery. They're going to need relationship recovery. They're going to need mental health recovery. Um, Supporting a return to work after gambling related treatment and making sure like gambling addiction isn't unspoken, right? And that it's a part of your wellness programs and your support around help seeking. Uh, just making sure it's not overlooked so that you're creating a space where people know, like, oh, this is something else that there are also support services for. My employer cares about this. Um, because even for individuals at this point, even for individuals already in long-term recovery, people aren't always aware that gambling can become a problem and it's becoming so much more pervasive. And so we could even be the first people to put that idea in someone's head, like, oh, this is something that you might need support and wellness around, you know? And so that's really, really important. So you probably already have existing policies that can help with this, right? Just looking at attendance, financial counseling that you might offer already, employee assistance, mental health counseling, opportunities for paid leave, supervisor training. So this can be incorporated into policies that are already there. This doesn't have to be starting from scratch or creating a brand new program. So here are some resources. This isn't like every possible thing out there, but I think these are going to be the easiest. So there are hotlines. There's a helpline at the national level. There's a helpline specifically for Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, we have a Council on Problem Gambling, a community-based organization that you could always team up with. There are a lot of support groups and peer support that tend to be effective around gambling problems, similar to substance use disorder recovery. So there's Gamblers Anonymous, there's Gam Talk, which is like an online version kind of. Gamanon, similar to Al-Anon, right, which is support for friends and family who have been affected, and um, that can be a helpful resource. There's something called Smart Recovery, which is a similar to a self-help and support group program that's evidence-based. Um, and then, frankly, like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is like one of the leading treatments at the individual level for people with gambling problems. So even just referring people to um, certified counselors for like what often looks like mental health treatment, but it's the CBT around gambling. In Rhode Island, there's something called self-exclusion, which is cool. Once someone's identified that they've had a problem and are trying to put in some work, uh, to avoid falling back into those behaviors, they can put themselves on a list to self exclude, meaning that if they show up at a casino, they will not let them in. They won't be let in. So it's like a layer, you have to know there's a problem, you have to be trying to address it, but it is something that's a part of people's kind of recovery experience that's been effective. So that's another thing to know about. And then financial counseling is just an essential part of this, right? Because if you really have gambling problems, your financial situation is going to be compromised. And so, financial counseling, how to get yourself out of a tough financial situation or come up with a plan, is going to be so critically important for someone to not feel that pressure that they need to go back and do this over and over again. So, that's just so important. Monica.
Thank you. Is there like a residential type of place treatment like mental health? And the reason why I ask is because if folks can't do it themselves or engage in some of this, self-motivated help, is there something like a residential place where they can go? Because I have a cousin
Hmm.
that is really bad when it comes to gambling. Like the minute he gets paid, he'll go and blow it until like he doesn't come home until it's all blown and that type of thing. And then like
Yeah.
the wife really struggles with some of these issues. So I'm wondering if there's more like intensive services
So
for these type of people that it's their way of life.
that's a really good question. I believe that there are intensive treatment programs. The thing is, they're not like gambling specific. I think that it's embedded in like programs that already exist where they might have the expertise to address gambling as a part of like their broader treatment around mental health and other addictions. And frankly, like we don't have a ton of options for
Mm.
gambling because for a lot of reasons, but some of it's because this is moving so quickly and we're getting behind. Some of it's because we don't think of gambling problems until after we think of all these other like mental health issues and substance use disorders. And so we don't have as many options, but I do believe there are like residential programs that you don't think of as specific to gambling where they can offer that support, but they
Oh,
would be
okay.
mixed in with like other folks dealing with other issues.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So those are a lot of the resources that you kind of put in your back pocket, bring with you as you might come across this. And then these conversations are hard. So instead of saying something like, "I think you might have a gambling problem," which may come from like a very kind, compassionate place, it's going to be easier to have that um, conversation if you say something like, "Hey, I've noticed you seem distracted recently. You missed a few deadlines, which isn't typical for you, and I just want to check in. And is everything okay?" And I think we can workshop this. We can talk about like, what if you see this? How could you approach that? What's a nice way to say that? What's a way to say that creates space for someone to tell you what's going on, right? And instead of feeling ashamed or shutting down. And I can share the PowerPoint for sure. So this is from the National Problem Gambling Council. Um, there's a young man named Sam DeMello who has publicly shared his story with gambling addiction, who and he's currently in recovery. And he worked in the tech sector, had a really good job. Um, and he started gambling so much on his phone that he would gamble at work. He could just gamble throughout the day while he was at work. Um, and this happened for years and it really compromised his performance at work. It compromised his relationship with his wife. She described him as like distant, unavailable, edgy, things that you might actually, see to appear in like other kinds of behavioral addictions. Um, Sam was eventually able to get support and get in to recovery from gambling addiction, but it took a lot. It wasn't a single intervention. It was feeling vulnerable enough to tell a person that he felt he had a problem. The first really big step. And then it took people talking to him about resources, about options. It took individual treatments. It took peer support and like peer groups. It took that self-exclusion that we talked about, putting himself on that list. And even these GAM blockers that you can put on your phone that stop you from being able to open up these types of apps. So it really took, a mix of all different types of interventions to help him into long-term recovery from gambling addiction, but it can be done. And it is really helpful for us to have these kinds of stories because we don't see these stories as much as we see stories of other people suffering from like substance use disorders. So what could you do like tomorrow? And maybe I'm being a little aggressive by saying tomorrow, but what is something we could do quickly? We can train supervisors about this, what to look out for, what the resources are that they can offer, how to have these conversations, normalizing these conversations, promote the EAP, include gambling as a part of your wellness discussions, your wellness programs. It's not an add-on. It's not something that doesn't exist. This is just a normal part of what we do. Share those resources and do everything that you can to reduce stigma in general and in those conversations that you're having. So key takeaways, gambling has changed and it affects workplaces. And most people don't recognize it. They might not recognize it themselves. Other people might not recognize it. But recovery is possible, and employers really matter in helping folks to get there and connecting folks to resources. So that's what I wanted to share. I can definitely share the PowerPoint, and this is my email if anyone wants to get in touch. But I'm happy to like talk about this some more.
Thank you, Dr. Sam. Really appreciate you. And this PowerPoint was very informative for me because I know the first time we met, when I heard like, but the suicide rate, like I was mind blown because you would think that other, sorry, what you think with other people, but that struggle from substance abuse and other things will have high like suicide rates. So I was shocked when you said like gambling, like people that deal with gambling have a higher suicide rates than those individuals. That was one that I feel like is just gonna stick with me because people just don't think that it's that serious, but it is serious.
Totally. I know I'm still shocked by it.
We run the 988 in Rhode Island at the Community
Awesome.
Care Alliance. And so I want to see if we can get these in front of the 988 counselors
Yes.
so that they have some better understanding of things.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
this is
They might
incredibly
not know.
helpful.
Yeah, they might not know that this is probably pretty prevalent, right? Among folks who
Mhm.
reach out and there's mental illness in there. There might also be substance use in there, but maybe the gambling part never gets addressed, never gets seen.
Mhm.
That's a
Yep.
great idea.
And it's not as like you can't see as much as you see people struggling with other things. I feel like it's more silent. So
Yes.
yeah.
I really like that this was part of recovery friendly workplace because, people only think of recovery as substance abuse or mental health, or
Mhm.
it's just it's sort of like a missing puzzle piece. It's great.
Totally. And I have
Yeah.
to thank Jeff. Jeff reached out to me and was like, please come present to these groups. It's so important. And frankly, I hadn't thought about it. Even I didn't think, oh, I better get into this group, so I really appreciate it because clearly it belongs here. But
Mm.
just like other folks, we are overlooking it because it's different.
Monica, you have your hand
Yes. I just wanted to comment, like, I think the suicide rate is very alarming and it's shocking. But then when I stop and think about it, it's not that shocking because, when you gamble and people lose everything, they look at it as like this is like the last resort. This is what's gonna resolve my issue. And it gets me thinking like this is why it's really important to, like, when we're talking about gambling and the addiction of gambling, to make sure that the mental health piece is always like attached to it for the treatment piece of it, uh, because they go hand in hand.
Totally. And I think that's like that statistic is something we should be like shouting from the rooftops.
Yeah,
And even to make the case to tie it into like mental health programming that we already have in place. Like, hey, this isn't a stretch. This is a new program. Just like, hey, when we talk about mental illness or we talk about suicide risk, like we can throw gambling in there. It's not a stretch. So, um, no, it's
absolutely.
it's upsetting though. It really is.
Mm.
up. Right. Does anyone else have any questions, any comments? Okay. So thank you again, Dr. Sam. This was a
Sure.
fabulous presentation. I definitely appreciate you coming and taking time out. And if anyone has any questions, you could please feel free to reach out to her. And I could also send out the slides, but if not, it will be on our Recovery Friendly Workplace YouTube pages.
Terrific. Thank you.
Of
Thank
course.
you so
Thank you.
much. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye. Bye,
Take
everyone. Have a
care.
nice day. Thank you, Dr. Sam.
Thanks.